Fritz was just there, a reliable island icon, always, almost always, splayed out in front of his rather palatial cat house on the porch, if not on top of the phone booth, sometimes draped languorously across the roof, but always there. He came to us when the island was a quieter, more innocent place, even just 8 years ago. There are more people, more traffic now. The roads are busier, and the cars move faster, as we've all learned. Our local paper, the Driftwood, has a Rancid Roses section where readers can toss bouquets or brickbats as they please. A couple of years ago, this rose appeared. Fritz the Cinema Cat would like to give a spray of wild roses to everyone who donated funds for his care in memory of Jim Stewart. Jim, a cat lover, was buried in the cemetery behind Fritz's home last week. Fritz promises to keep the area most free. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
I don't think James Bond got this kind of turnout. The place is full and it's not even really 2 o'clock yet. It's a solemn occasion. If you want to come up and pay your respects when the time comes, Fritz is actually right here with us in this jar. There's lots of stuff to see and lots of great pictures to see here as well. There's also a chance to donate to the SPCA, which you might want to take advantage of. I thought I'd say a few words if that's okay, and then afterwards we have another surprise for you. There's a funny folk tradition that plays out whenever major world events take place. I call it the where were you, what were you doing tradition. Everybody who's of an age knows where they were, what they were doing when they heard that Kennedy was shot, or there were men on the moon. Those shorter of tooth will have no trouble remembering where they were, what they were doing when the planes flew into the towers. This month, my fellow islanders got to play a Salt Spring variation of the game. I think it's safe to say that everybody in this room knows exactly where they were and what they were doing when they learned that Fritz the Cat had moved on. For me, it was nothing dramatic that I was engaged in. I was hunched over my laptop trying to finish a piece for my Planet Salt Spring column on CBC Radio when I heard the telltale ping of an email coming in. It was from Michael Levy, and it was slugged some sad news. I considered not opening it at all because I kind of knew it was going to be about Fritz, and I kind of knew it wasn't going to be good. But I did, and suddenly whatever it was I'd been writing didn't seem to be all that compelling anymore. So I started writing a eulogy, and a few hours later I was in Victoria at the CBC studio putting it on the air, and if you didn't hear it, you're going to hear it now. This is the eulogy that I wrote. Some grim news from the Island Kingdom this afternoon, I fear. Yesterday, one of Salt Spring's most prominent citizens was struck by a car, cut down in his prime while crossing the road in front of his residence.
Because we can speak a little bit slower.
Okay. I speak of Fritz, the Cinema Cat,
That's better.
a mature gentleman of indeterminate years and uncertain lineage. All we know is, 8 years ago, an unannounced ball of white fur with brown patches appeared in front of the island's only movie house, looked it over, and moved right in. Well, onto the front porch at any rate. But it wasn't long before he was showing up at film openings and gliding through the door ticketless between moviegoers' feet. Fritz added a certain frisson to the Salt Spring movie-going experience. There you'd be, absorbed in the theatrics of Meryl Streep or Ralph Fiennes, up on the big screen, when suddenly you'd feel an ethereal whisk across the back of your calves, or maybe a wet nose nudging your hand. And that's if Fritz was feeling standoffish. Fritz could be way more paws on when the spirit moved him. Michael Levy, the cinema's owner-operator, recalls, "I always loved watching him saunter down the aisle to find some nice comfy lap to sit on, and the reaction he would receive when he would jump up on some poor unsuspecting person." Fritz could be pretty imposing in his prime. Living on a diet of field mice and second-hand popcorn, he grew to quite a size. Luckily for Fritz, and for our laps, Kathy Newman, a local SPCA volunteer, took Fritz in tow, groomed him, got him his shots, and put him on a healthy diet. There was drama in Fritz's life too, and not just on the movie screen. A couple of years ago, a well-meaning if misguided visitor to the island took it upon herself to kidnap Fritz and take him back to the mainland for, as she said, his own good. The visitor had not allowed for Salt Spring's gumboot telegraph. Emails went out, telephone calls were made, the SPCA, the RCMP, and BC Ferries were alerted. Concerned locals rushed to Salt Spring's 3 ferry terminals to eyeball each and every car lined up to leave the island. In the end, the would-be kidnapper was tracked down and cornered at a local B&B. Fritz was rescued and returned to his house on the porch of the cinema. Turns out the kidnapper meant well. She was concerned that Fritz was living in a dangerous environment right next to a major island intersection with cars whipping in and out of the parking lot. I guess she wasn't entirely wrong, as things turned out. Still, Fritz thrived in that environment for 8 years. As an RCMP constable said post-kidnapping, "He's quite traffic-wise, he's well cared for and well loved. I have no concerns." And neither did the rest of us. Fritz was just there, a reliable island icon, almost always splayed out in front of his rather palatial cat house on the porch, if not on top of the phone booth, sometimes draped languorously across the roof, but always there. He came to us when the island was a quieter, more innocent place, even just 8 years ago. There are more people, more traffic now. The roads are busier, and the cars move faster, as we've all learned. Our local paper, the Driftwood, has a Rancid Roses section where readers can toss bouquets or brickbats as they please. A couple of years ago, this rose appeared. Fritz the Cinema Cat would like to give a spray of wild roses to everyone who donated funds for his care in memory of Jim Stewart. Jim, a cat lover, was buried in the cemetery behind Fritz's home last week. Fritz promises to keep the area mouse-free. Michael Levy, Fritz's landlord, I guess, says that Fritz will be cremated and that a memorial will be held as soon as things settle down a bit. I'll bet it's well attended. I can't imagine the number of rose bouquets that will be offered in next week's edition of the Driftwood. And after that, of course, we'll all move on and Salt Spring will get busier and faster. Will Fritz the Cinema Cat get forgotten in the rush? Not likely. Did I forget to mention the name of Salt Spring Cinema? It's called the Fritz. Fritz is dead. Long live the Fritz. That's what went out on All Points West the day after Fritz died, and I've been thinking pretty much ever since about what I would say here today. But the truth is, it's already been said by dozens and dozens of islanders at coffee shops and barber shops, and at the recycling depot and the liquor store, and in the pages of the Driftwood and up here on cards. Much more eloquently and thoughtfully than I could manage. Some highlights for me in the last week of Fritz Mania. David Borrowman's musings about just why Fritz means so much to us, meant so much to us, and means so much to us, and why it mattered that he lived where he lived, with the attendant dangers there too. And also the roses from some of Fritz's Legion fans in this week's Driftwood, which I would read if I thought I could get through them without choking up. My advice, get a copy of this week's Driftwood. It's a keeper. It also contains one nasty and mean-spirited letter that gets just about everything concerning Fritz and the cinema and Salt Spring dead wrong. But hey, that's Salt Spring too, eh? If we ever all agreed about anything on this island, it would probably implode and sink into the Salish Sea. The truth is, Fritz had a heck of a good life. Spectacular mansion at the heart of the island, good food, grooming, and free medical care from Kathy Newman. Front page celebrity coverage from Derek Lundy and the Driftwood. A full press search and rescue operation from the RCMP. More fans than Randy Bachman and Robert Bateman combined. And an entire cinema named after him. This cat was lionized. I think one of the myriad Fritz roses that appeared in the Driftwood this week said it best for me. 7 years at Central and look at all the friends you made. Your name and your story will live on, I promise. And it's signed Michael Levy. And that's a promise we can all hope to keep. Now we have a real treat for you. Jamie R.T. has written a song about Fritz.
Well, when I heard that, I'm a big cat lover, and when I heard the news about Fritz, it was a very sad day for me. And I thought it would be very appropriate to write a little piece for Fritz. And so I started, trying to work my feelings into music and something slow and mournful, and it wasn't working. And I ended up writing a piece that is, it's a jig. And it starts off a little on the sad side and ends up quite playful and happy, and I think it's very appropriate. So anyways, I haven't got a name for it yet. Maybe I'll just call it Fritz, but here it is. And if I have to look over here, it's because it's rather fresh and there are some notes in case I need them.
else who has Fritz's stories or songs or dances or whatever that they'd like to share, you're more than welcome to do so. I know Hetty Clues would like to say something right now. And anybody else after that, please help us out.
Oh, Louise Nye.
And Louise Nye, yeah.
Louise. Oh.
Can you sit here?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share a poem which was written in the 18th century, so it's even older than I am. And one of my favorite poets of that period was thought to be mad because he used to pray while standing on the corner of the street. His name was Christopher Smart, but his poet friends called him Kit. And Samuel Johnston said of him, "I'd as lief pray with Kit Smart as anybody else alive." And the name Kit is quite appropriate for Christopher because one of his great loves was the kitty cat. And one of his poems, called Jubilate Agno, I mustn't get all professorial here, but that means in praise of the lamb. And in this poem, he gave thanks for all the great things God had given him. And among them was his cat, Geoffrey. So this is a poem in praise of his cat, Geoffrey. And I'm just going to read a few of the lines because they seem to me to say what I want to say about beloved Fritz. For I will consider my cat, Geoffrey, for he is of the tribe of tiger. For he will not do destruction if he is well fed, neither will he spit without provocation. For he purrs in thankfulness when God tells him he is a good cat. For he is an instrument for children to learn benevolence upon. For every house is incomplete without him. For the Lord commanded Moses concerning cats at the departure of the children of Israel from Egypt. Michael, for every family had at least one cat in the bag. For he is the quickest to the mark of any creature. For he is tenacious of his point. For he is a mixture of gravity and waggery. For there is nothing brisker than his life when in motion. For he can scrabble upon woggle at the word of command. For he knows that God is his Saviour. And for there is nothing sweeter than his peace when at rest.
Louise Nye, I know you're here, but I don't know where, and I know you have something to say. I just want to tell everybody about Louise Nye that she has done something for at least 150 of you. You can come up and get a picture of Fritz, courtesy of Louise. Come on up.
Well, just this morning I decided I was going to write something, and I started to scribble it out, and then I got my laptop out, and then I decided just to put it all aside and just wing it. I've got a few little notes, and I've had to cross a lot off because they've already been mentioned, so I'll really have to wing it. The picture does come up in my short little story here. I'm going to call this little eulogy Fritz's Secrets, because there's a lot of little secrets that people don't know about Fritz. I happen to be an acquaintance with Fritz's first owner. I don't know whether she's here, but if she is, she's very shy and she would not want to get up and speak. I am not known to be shy, so here I am. Fritz was born in 1986, 100 years after this hall was opened, which seemed to be most appropriate to me. He was born in a dresser drawer up on 4th Street, and his mother was a wild bush cat. And she was taken in, and she's white, a white cat with long hair, and she got friendly with a short-haired, brown-haired cat. And that's how Fritz got his spots. And he was called Spotty for the first few years of his life. He was one of triplets, and his two little sisters were a mixed colors, and their names were Sharky 2 and Diamond. And I backtrack. His father was Sharky, and his mother, get this, was called Vicious. Well, she was the wild bush cat, right? Apparently she ended up being quite a gentle soul, and I think is still living, as a matter of fact, and looks a lot like Fritz. He grew to be an adult with his sisters and was very happy in a caring, loving home. And he even, this is his big secret, became a father of kittens. So there are kittens around the island, about 8, 9 years old perhaps, who are, and his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever, who are Fritz's offspring. So if you see any little ones or adults running around that look like Fritz, they are probably his. One day he decided he just wanted adventure, and he left home. And the family were really distraught, and they had lots of cats and dogs and everything, but they just missed him so much. Spotty, rather, left home. And they searched the neighborhood high and low and couldn't find him. And they thought, well, that's it, you know. And quite a long while went by, and then I got a phone call from the owner, and she said, "Do you know anything about the cat who was at the cinema?" And she called me because, as you may know, I one time was one of the owners here of the cinema business. And I said, "Well, I know a little about him. Well, what do you want him back?" She said, "Well, I think," oh, sorry. She said, "Well, I think it's my cat that ran away a couple of years ago." I said, "Well, would you want him back?" And she said, "Well, I'd just like to talk to somebody at the cinema to see how he's doing and what the situation." So I gave him the name of one of the workers here, and she had a conversation with her and decided that he was well loved here, very happy, cared for, and that he should be allowed to stay in his new home, because this is the home that he found, you know. So he came here. He wasn't brought here, right? He came here. He wanted to be here. So as you know, he started out in a little cardboard box. He was in quite a bad way when he arrived, and the cinema staff more or less saved his life by removing a plastic ring from around his neck, and at one time he even had a part of a garbage bag around his hind legs tied in there, and he was very skinny and very weak, and they saved him, and he took a liking to popcorn and leftovers that were dropped on the floor. And then he eventually, he was fed so much and with so much love and care from everybody who came, and they would drop by little goodies on the front porch and everything. Then he actually got so big and so fat and so sick that they had to trot him off to get looked after. And then when they brought him back, there's a little note there on there about him and saying, "Please don't feed Fritz." So every day, Kathy Newman, bless her heart, who is considered Fritz's guardian angel, was brought his food to him and looked after him and took him for shots and got him defleed and the whole bit. And he looked forward to her car coming every morning and doing that. One kind man, I don't know his name, maybe he's here today, he actually graduated Fritz from the cardboard box with the blanket in it to a plywood box, which was, and you've seen the pictures of the plywood box right on the front there, and that's his first the second little home. And then another kind gentleman who is Jeff Levy, Michael's brother, built him the grand house that's out there now with Fritz the Cinema Cat over the door. And as Arthur said, that he just fit into the neighborhood, the whole island so well, and he would jump up on top of the roof and on top of the phone booth and watch all the cars going back and forth to work. And so many people would say, "Oh, that really sets me up for the day. If I look there and I see Fritz, it makes me feel good that it's going to be a good day," when they see him sitting on his house or on top of the phone booth. What else? Oh yeah, he also liked to sit on laps during movies, as Arthur did mention, and he would like to surprise people by jumping on them. And then came the famous catnapping, and he was made even more famous by that. And then one day I was in the place where his first owner works, and she ran over to me with some kitten photos. And they were just so cute. It was Fritz as a kitten, and he was sitting under a Christmas tree, his first Christmas tree. And there was also a photo of him with his two little sisters. So I said, oh, can I get copies? And she just went, "Oh." I said, well, I'm going to take them to the cinema. I'm going there tonight to see the movie, so I would really like to have the photos. So I put them in a frame, and they're the ones up here of Fritz as a baby and sitting under the tree. And then I went in to see came in to see the movie, and it was the Harry Potter film. And I sat there and I realized, I thought, oh my gosh, Fritz was a Sagittarian, like me. So I thought, you know what, I think I could really get under his skin and understand him. I'm going to write a story about him. So that's when I started to write Fritz the Cinema Cat. And at one time I got bogged down, as writers do sometimes, and I came to the show and I was sitting there and at the side, and all of a sudden, jump, jump, and there was Fritz, and he was sitting there looking up at me, staring at me. And I said, okay, I can take the hint. I'll get back at the book. And the only time he ever jumped on my lap. The only time. And then the next morning I got back at the book. And so the illustrator wanted to have photos of Fritz so that she could do some illustrations. So every day, every other day I'd come up with my camera and I'd look all around and I couldn't find Fritz. And I looked in the cemetery and I looked in the woods, the bushes and whatever. Couldn't find him. So I phoned up faithful Kathy Newman there, and she said, oh, you got to be up there at 8 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I come with this food. Okay, so I dragged myself out of bed early and got up here with a loaded camera, and he was all anxious to get the food, and she put down the food, and he started to eat, and then she said, okay, time for pictures, Fritz, and she picked him up, and he didn't want to pose, and I said, look, you go to work and just leave me with it, I'll see what can happen. So I just put myself on the front steps and just sat there, just like Fritz, two Sagittarians together, just sitting there, and all of a sudden he, after about 10 minutes, and he got up and he sort of nudge, 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 had my camera in that hand, and I looked, and he walked over to the front of his little house and sat there and posed. Now that's the picture, that's the little picture that I have that I would like to give to you, if you can come up and get that after. So he posed, and then he jumped up on the railing, and then he went down and showed me his scratch poster, which I didn't even know was there. He's got a scratch poster under there? It's actually holding up the hall. It's one of the actual posts, And his second little house is also under there, which he also used in the summer, because it got hot and he'd like to go down there and be cool. And then the final thing, what a ham he was. He just jumped up on the very tippy top of the phone booth and just sat there, took the picture, and that's the one that's on the back of the book. So I did that and got back at it, and here we go. Where's my next one? While Kathy Newman was there, when we were talking there, she said, I'm really concerned about what's going to happen to Fritz when if he gets sick, or if he gets really old, or if he has to have an operation, or if he can't live outside anymore. And she says, I really don't know what to do. I would love to take him home, but I've got so many cats. I think she's got about 6 or 8 or whatever, and that many dogs as well. And she said, I would really like him to have a place. And I said, well, his first owner would really like to has offered to have him back. She says, well, and she too has many cats, and he really has to be in a place where he's the only cat, and he's a very independent individual cat, and I think he would be happier if he was the only cat. What about you? And I said, I have a cat. I had a little Lynx Point Siamese with blue eyes, a little female. In November, she met her end very quickly, very similar to Fritz. And I thought, what's this mean? What does this mean? And as much as I would have loved to have had Fritz on my lap every night to pat, watching movies on TV, but he belonged to the whole island. He was everybody's cat, right? And that's the way it was going to stay. So then the book got out, and then it got up to February, and we can all say, oh, this should have happened, we should have done this should have done, this shouldn't have happened. But I think that just as with people, there's a time, and there's a time for us to go, and there's a time for our pets to go as well. And it was obviously Fritz's time. And isn't it great that we didn't see him as a skinny little old thing that had to have medications and operations and that just wouldn't have been him, So we can always remember him in his prime, in his glory, the proud cat, wonderful, healthy cat that he was. And we'll be able to remember him because there's an offer of a statue going to be made of him. It's probably going to be kept and put in the garden at the side where you sit on the bench. And also, there's going to be probably a brass plaque put somewhere, probably out at the front, maybe along the side here. And there's also talk of perhaps a mural. As he said in the book, there's pictures of all sorts of animals on the sides of the windows. You know, there's raccoons and there's deer and there's all sorts of things, and sheep, but no cat. So perhaps a cat could be put up there sometime. A picture of Fritz, if one of the many artists on Salt Spring would like to do that. And also, I've decided that there's going to be a sequel, and you may wonder, what on earth could that be about? Well, some people believe that cats go to kitty heaven, and that only cats are there. Well, who's going to pat them? I think that people and cats all go to the same place. So, and also, I have it that he's going to meet up with my little cat Misty, and the two of them are going to have all sorts of adventures on the other side, as they call it, or heaven, or the hereafter, or whatever you want to call it. Now, a lot of people think that Fritz is gone, and I have a little story, quick little story to tell. 2 days after his passing, the worker who is not here today, who sells popcorn, was, every time she'd open up the hall and she would come up and she would go up, out there and back again, and 2 days after she looked, and there he was walking up the aisle. She actually saw Fritz's apparition walking up the aisle, and then she went like this again, and he was gone. Okay. So when you come to the movies and you feel on your lap, and you feel like you want to, everybody will understand because he's still here. Thank you very much.
If there's anyone else who'd like to say something, please come forward. Oh, Sherry. Good. Come on.
Awesome. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Sherry Standen, and Wednesday nights will often find me here opening up for dog class. And Arthur, I know exactly where I was on Wednesday night when Fritz passed on, because I happened to be here. I was opening up for dog class, and I had arrived quite early for my class. And unfortunately, Fritz's accident had happened just before I arrived. And so my husband and I had to deal with getting Fritz to the vet and expediting that situation. And I don't think I fully processed what happened that night. But what I really want to tell you about, I'm going to sit down now that I can relax after I said that, because it was quite difficult. I wanted to tell you about Fritz's spirit and how he acted at dog class, because he was truly an amazing cat. I would come in sometimes before my assistants, and I would set up for dog class, and Fritz and I would be here alone. And I would talk to Fritz just as if he was a person. And he would follow me around, and I'd get the table and set everything up. And if my assistants, my dog assistants, had arrived while I was setting up, then we'd all remark how Fritz was here, and we'd pet him and say hi to him. And then the dogs would start coming in for class. And Fritz would just lay there. He was like my husband said, he was almost like a king. And he would regally accept everybody that came into the hall. Now, unfortunately, I eventually had to kick Fritz out of the class because it was the dogs that would freak out. It wasn't Fritz. And his spirit was so calm and so amazing. And by the way, I just wanted to set the record straight that none of my dogs had arrived by the time, Fritz had his accident. So none of my dogs had anything to do with Fritz running out on the road. But his spirit was amazing, and he was calm, and I just think Fritz was the best ambassador for the cat species. So that's what I wanted to share with you about Fritz.
Hi to all Fritz's friends. How many of you knew Fritz was into square dancing? Yes, every Thursday he would greet us in our regalia, and he just stole the show every Thursday, no matter what we wore. He still stole the show. And this all started for myself and for Stan, my partner, 6 years ago when we started coming here every Thursday evening. From September until about the end of April, he'd be waiting for us all to come because he loved company. I'm sure you all know that. But more than that, he loved two other things as well. He loved the beautiful music, such as that was being played earlier, and I know he would be here really enjoying that music because it was lively and he just loved it. And while the music was playing, and even if the square dancers were already going around the room, he would just get in between them all. If he was going to cross the room and see another laugh, only by someone who was sitting not dancing. Now Fritz and I shared something very special because I whispered in his ear when I first met him and said, I have 9 cats. And he was impressed. So every Thursday, he'd rush over, check out first of all to see what I was wearing, to see if he approved of it or not, and then he'd jump up on my lap and he'd start sniffing. He was checking out that I still had my cats, and he could always tell that we had. Then I lost one of my cats. Well, actually, she was 23 in Thanksgiving time. And he could tell that I was sad about that. Very sad, as I am about Fritz now. But he was so intuitive. He could sense how you were feeling. And he would come up and be very consoling if you weren't really feeling that good, as I wasn't at that time. But he encouraged me to keep dancing. That was one thing I learned from him. Because you can't give up. You have to, even if you're feeling sad. Because when you come into this wonderful hall that represents over 100 years of community spirit, instantly when you come in, you're uplifted. You're uplifted. And you feel better. And with Fritz being there, you feel all the better. Because he represented what was true and good. And he made us reach and just go to the best of our own spirits. He brought the best out of us, I think. And he tied us all together. And of course he was famous not only in Canada. I had letters. I had copies of Fritz's newspaper articles, and also coming and going in other places in the world about Fritz, because he was famous all over. And people related to something in him and to a community that appreciated and loved their animal. Because although he was more than an animal, he was a real spirit. And that's already been marked on. So I just had to let you know that when the music was playing and when we were coming here on Thursday night, he always greeted us so warmly. He knew we always had tea afterwards. He would kind of like to check in there and see if there's anything for him, but we had word we weren't allowed to share it. But he gave us so much. He pulled us all together, and he made us appreciate not only himself, but all the creatures in the world.
I can't even say my name, I'm so nervous. Brewer. And I'm also a raging granny here on the island, and believe me, I feel more comfortable with my hat on and my skirt on than I do at the moment. But can I sit down just to do this, please, before I fall down? This is from the book Chicken Soup for Pet Lovers, and some of you may know the one, but I just feel that it's worth sharing. And it's called The Rainbow Bridge. There is a bridge connecting heaven and earth. It is called the Rainbow Bridge because of its many colours. Just this side of the Rainbow Bridge is a land of meadows, hills and valleys, all of it covered with lush green grass. When a beloved pet dies, the pet goes to this lovely land. There is always food and water and warm spring weather. I'm very nervous, I'm sorry. There the old and frail animals are young again. Those who are made whole once more. They play all day with each other, content and comfortable. It's not very long. There is only one thing missing. They are not with the special person who loved them on earth. So each day they run and play until the day comes when one suddenly stops playing and looks up. Then the nose twitches, the ears are up, the eyes are staring. You have been seen. And that one suddenly runs from the group. You take him or her in your arms and embrace. Your face is kissed again and again, and you look once more into the eyes of the trusting pet. Then together you cross the rainbow bridge, never again to be separated, and the author is unknown. But I just think it's so beautiful.